is we're only playing one defensive scheme, and in this league, it's too good. You can't, and people are going to pick us apart. And so,
Sophie's telling it all. Oh, Sophie is spilling the beans. Sophie saying we're playing one defensive scheme. That's pure coaching. That is pure coaching. Oh, Sophie cooking. Sophie cooking is what.
Imagine this situation. A professional athlete stands before a room full of journalists and openly discusses the kind of harsh internal realities that coaching staffs usually do everything in their power to keep strictly confidential. That is exactly what Sophie Cunningham did when she took her seat at the microphone and informed reporters that the Indiana Fever are currently utilizing just one single defensive strategy.
What Kelsey Mitchell's speaking about today. So we finna listen to Kelsey Mitchell.
We were talking to Sophie about just the level of frustration with the group right now. You guys had a meeting yesterday.
Oh, yeah.
How would you assess where the mood is at with the team and how you guys move on from those two losses?
how y'all know we had a meeting?
Sophie told us.
Take a moment to truly consider that. A solitary defensive look in a league brimming with elite, world-class talent. At this competitive level of basketball, relying on a single scheme isn't a tactical choice. It is a glaring admission of vulnerability, and it signals a much larger internal crisis that goes far deeper than a standard post-game media session.
Need that in-season motivation.
What is the level of frustration, if at all, with the team right now?
Yeah, it's we have all the pieces, and now you just got to put the puzzle together. And I think that each year has growing pains, and we're in that right now. Like I said, we have all the pieces we need, but it's owning your role, knowing your role, and also just like being tough. We're just too.
To fully grasp the weight of her words, we need to look at the exact circumstances surrounding that afternoon. The Fever were coming off back-to-back defeats, leaving them with an even .500 record. Meanwhile, Kelsey Mitchell was facing intense scrutiny from reporters, fielding difficult questions about a private team meeting that had taken place just a day earlier. The timing alone speaks volumes about the mounting tension inside the organization.
I think something that's hurting us right now is we're only playing one defensive scheme, and in this league, it's too good. You can't, and people are going to.
In the world of professional sports, the math is simple. A franchise does not gather the roster for an intense, 2-hour meeting right before a scheduled practice if things are going well. When a team is functioning properly, they review a quick film session and get straight to work on the court. Closed-door meetings of that length are a clear sign of immediate damage control.
I say that, maybe 3 people can execute, but if those other 2 players can't, it's a breakdown on defense. And so 1 through 5.
Oh, man. Sophie said it's 3 players that can't execute basketball schemes. Sophie Cunningham is telling it. Y'all understand, she said it's 3 to 2 players. So that means that these are players that's on a team, possibly starters that cannot do basketball schemes.
When the media inevitably asks how a squad plans to bounce back from consecutive, frustrating losses, the genuine response rarely matches the polished, safe answers that public relations executives prefer to see broadcast on the evening news.
A game like that Portland game do for, do this kind of meeting, getting you guys to do certain things you need to do?
Yeah, no one wants to have these meetings, but every team has them. Everyone has trials. Everyone has shortcomings, and I'm just thankful ours is at the beginning of the season and not during, September, October. But I don't even know. We didn't even watch them. That tells you how bad it is. Normally she's watching every second of it. And so we wanted to flush that one. Everyone knew it was bad. We all kind of watched it on our own. And it's just not acceptable. We're too good to be playing like that.
Have you seen positives defensively in practice, and it just not translating to games, or is it kind of just everything?
I think that we found a scheme that worked, but once you do it 2 or 3 games, people are going to pick that apart.
In this instance, Cunningham completely bypassed the usual safe answers. She addressed the room directly, bluntly stating that the squad was playing without the necessary physical toughness, that a soft approach fundamentally contradicted who they were supposed to be as a team, and that they needed to change that mindset immediately.
Good. I think that tough conversations need to be had, and we have a mature group that wants to hear, honest feedback, and it's up to us players to, keep ourselves accountable. And if you can't keep yourself accountable, have a teammate that.
This was a veteran player publicly calling out her own locker room on the record. In professional sports, there is an unwritten rule that teammates must always shield one another from outside criticism, maintaining a united front no matter how difficult things get behind the scenes.
I think when a coach wants to challenge you, she just sees your potential, and it's not always going to be good. I've been in and out of the starting lineup right now, and you have to put your ego and pride aside for what's best for the team and what the team needs. And so I think if everyone is willing to do that and wants to see the person right next to them be more successful than them, we're going to be...
Almost every single time, athletes will rely on the predictable script, offering a generic statement about needing better execution before nodding politely and moving to the next microphone. Cunningham, however, completely tossed aside the standard media playbook. Even more surprising was the fact that she was only just beginning to pull back the curtain. She openly revealed to the press that the team possessed roughly 10 distinct defensive schemes last season, and they entered the current season with that same number of options available. Yet, at this moment, they are limited to just one because, as she bluntly explained, the roster simply cannot execute the other choices. This distinction is crucial. The issue isn't a lack of preparation or a poorly designed playbook. The strategies are fully developed and ready to be implemented. The situation becomes even more intense as Cunningham gets incredibly specific, pointing out that 2 or 3 players are consistently failing to execute the assignments. We are not talking about a systemic failure across the entire roster. It comes down to a small handful of individuals. For a franchise that relies heavily on a young, developing core, that kind of breakdown leads to a very uncomfortable truth. Consider the dynamic on the floor. When 3 players execute the defensive rotation perfectly, but the remaining 2 fail to rotate, the entire defensive structure instantly falls apart. As any student of the game understands, a high-level defense only functions when all 5 athletes move together as a single, connected unit. By outlining the breakdown this clearly, she provided a step-by-step explanation of why the Fever's defense repeatedly collapses during critical moments late in the game. Furthermore, she framed this strictly as a personnel issue rather than a failure of leadership. The coaching staff provided the blueprint, but certain players are failing to put it into practice. Perhaps the most compelling aspect of this honesty is who the statement ultimately protects from public blame. The prevailing media narrative has been eager to place the responsibility for Indiana's recent struggles entirely on the shoulders of the team's most famous superstar. Yet, Cunningham's tactical breakdown suggests the exact opposite is true. This current defensive struggle is not centered around the marquee star at all. It is entirely a reflection of specific role players who have not maintained the necessary physical and mental focus on the defensive end. Hearing a current teammate deliver that evaluation publicly carries immense weight, the kind of authentic locker room credibility that a television analyst could never replicate. As I mentioned, this league is unforgiving, which leads directly to her next point regarding the tactical trap the team created for themselves. After finding a single defensive look that yielded positive results, they leaned on it heavily as a temporary fix for 2 or 3 games. Naturally, the rest of the league responded exactly how smart professional teams always do when they see the same footage repeatedly. Opposing coaches analyzed the scheme in the film room, identified the weak points, and systematically picked it apart on a possession-by-possession basis. That is the harsh reality of becoming a predictable, one-dimensional basketball team. Cunningham noted that when opposing offenses begin switching every screen from positions 1 through 5, it actually should generate ideal mismatches that favor the Fever. It creates scenarios where a quick guard can exploit a slower defender, or their dominant post players can establish deep position near the basket. The strategic answers to punish those switches are right there in the game plan, but the on-court execution is completely lacking. That massive disconnect between having talented players on the roster and actually maximizing their abilities on the floor is the defining story of their season so far. She then shifted focus to discuss the absolute necessity of setting aside personal pride for the greater good of the group. She spoke earnestly about maintaining self-accountability during difficult stretches and knowing when to lean on a trusted teammate when you realize you aren't meeting the required standard on a particular night. This is the unmistakable language of true leadership. This wasn't a case of an athlete deflecting blame or throwing peers under the bus to save herself. In fact, she has been remarkably transparent about her own challenges before those exact same microphones, openly discussing her personal struggles with consistency. She has been moving in and out of the starting lineup herself, fighting for consistent playing time alongside the rest of the bench. When a player navigating that kind of uncertain role speaks up and challenges the team's toughness, the message resonates differently in the locker room. It doesn't sound like criticism coming from an insulated superstar. It comes from someone down in the trenches who is entirely willing to hold herself to that exact same standard. When you take a step back and examine the entire situation, where does this leave the franchise moving forward? The reality is that Sophie Cunningham just delivered one of the most brutally honest and unfiltered post-game evaluations seen from any active WNBA player all year. It was a complete masterclass in transparency. During that media session, she validated the reports of a lengthy player-led meeting, one that initially included the coaching staff before transitioning into a grueling 2-hour session among the players themselves. She openly acknowledged that the Fever had to abandon 9 of their 10 defensive schemes simply because the current lineup cannot run them effectively. Most importantly, she placed the accountability precisely where it belongs: on the shoulders of a few specific individuals who haven't fully committed to the demanding, unglamorous physical effort that championship-level defense requires. That specific brand of raw honesty is incredibly rare in professional sports for a reason. Most veteran athletes understand exactly how the media ecosystem functions. They know that the moment you offer specific details about internal failures, it will instantly be transformed into a major headline, a viral social media clip, and an ongoing distraction that follows the organization for weeks. Yet, fully aware of those consequences, Cunningham chose to speak her mind anyway. Whether you view that choice as a breath of fresh air or a dangerous locker room distraction waiting to trigger a larger collapse depends entirely on what happens next on the court. If the Fever respond with an intense, revitalized defensive performance on Thursday night, she will be praised as a visionary leader who knew exactly how to motivate her teammates. Conversely, if the on-court performance remains unchanged, those exact quotes will be used as standard soundbites by every sports network whenever the team suffers another loss. This situation also highlights a much broader issue regarding how women's professional basketball is covered by the media. The simplest narrative for commentators to focus on will always center around the main superstar, primarily because that topic generates the most digital engagement and online traffic. However, the actual basketball dilemma that Cunningham detailed has very little to do with the primary star on the roster. Instead, it centers entirely on the unglamorous middle portion of the rotation, those specific role players whose repeated defensive errors might not dominate a viral highlight reel, but will absolutely manifest as costly defeats on the scoreboard. What she ultimately did was bypass the corporate PR strategy completely, providing everyone watching with a far more accurate, even if less convenient, explanation for the team's current struggles. What makes her approach so compelling is how she framed this entire critique around the idea of belief. Her concluding message focused heavily on the vital importance of having a head coach who pushes you, a leader who recognizes your untapped potential, and someone who maintains faith in your abilities even during those difficult moments when you lose faith in yourself. Pay close attention to that sentiment. That is not the language of a broken roster that is unraveling from within. Rather, it is the passionate expression of a highly competitive group that fundamentally believes it is far better than its current win-loss record suggests, and they are simply overflowing with frustration. They haven't been able to translate that potential into actual victories yet, but the necessary ingredients are undeniably present inside that locker room, a reality Cunningham emphasized in multiple ways during her press conference. The primary challenge facing the organization right now comes down to execution, defining an identity, and discovering some collective mental toughness. The encouraging takeaway from all of this internal tension is that those 3 elements can absolutely be corrected in the middle of a demanding season, provided the roster sets their egos aside and fully commits to the process. After analyzing this entire situation, I want to hear your thoughts on the matter. Was Sophie Cunningham justified in sharing these harsh internal realities directly on camera, openly challenging the squad's toughness and pointing directly to the individuals failing to execute the defensive game plan? Or did she make a critical error, providing every upcoming opponent and media critic with a detailed blueprint of exactly how to exploit the Indiana Fever? There is no middle ground on this issue. I want you to take a definitive stance and share your perspective in the comments below, because your answer reflects a foundational belief about whether raw transparency or strict corporate discipline ultimately builds a winning basketball team.